What up, guys? What up? What up? I am Lou. We're going to be talking about today, guys, how to join two data sets in AWS Glue. So the video today is how do we take two sources. In this case, it's going to be a JSON, a CSV. How do we join them together to generate an extract, which is going to be a JSON file. And ultimately, you could do whatever. It doesn't have to be an extract of the JSON file. It could be you load it to a database, you load it to data warehouse. But in our case, we're going to generate a extract of joining these two data sets together, and it's going to be in the JSON format. Before we get started, guys, give me a like, give me a follow if you can. Man, I appreciate it. And thanks for all the love I've been getting. Let's get started, guys. Hey, the sponsor of today's video is GoShareIt. Go check them out at GoShareIt.io. It's a sharing platform that allows you to share large and small files, where it makes it very easy to share. Your recipient, all they need is a download link, and they're good to go. Again, all right, guys. So we're going to be using AWS Glue services, right? So if you're not familiar with AWS Glue is a ETL service. That's pretty much the specialty of it, right? ETL, again, extract, transfer, and load. That's a core functionality. It's very good for that. Very easy to get started, get set up. So we're going to be utilizing that service in this case. Before we get started, let's kind of review the data files, the data sources that we're going to be dealing with. So I created a bucket. I have this bucket called YouTube storage 111012. Then I have three folders. One folder is the customer folder, which is a JSON file. I'm going to show that in a minute so you kind of see how that format looks. The second file that we're going to be joining with the customer file, is the location file. So it's a geo data. So location meaning geographical data. City, zip code, state name, state abbreviation, county, things of that nature, right? So all of that's part of this file. And again, this is a CSV file. So we have two different data sets, JSON, CSV. The join that we're going to do does not mean that you could only do with JSON, CSV. You could join a database table with a CSV file together and ultimately take that results and load it to a database, data warehouse, some kind of extract, right? JSON file. I mean, it's pretty much your choice. But the example that we're going to do is we're going to join two different data formats, right? JSON, CSV together, and then we're going to generate a output of a JSON file, but with both data sets joining together, including the file. So that's what we're going to do. So let's look at the file. I want you to be familiar with the file as well. So let me go to my download, and here's my geo file that I have. So you can take a look at it, and let me open up my contacts file. So just so you kind of see, we're dealing with two different files, right? CSV, straightforward. We have name, abbreviation, zip code, county name, city. So we have all of that information here. And then if you look at our JSON, we have customer information, which in this case is first name, last name, company name, address, city, county, state. Now you could tell we do have some key information in here already. We're just using this as an example to show you how to join. But a lot of cases you may have scenarios where, for example, you have state abbreviation, but you don't have the state name, where this master file over here does have state name. And so in this exercise, we're going to end up joining zip code of this contact list with the zip code in this geo data set that we have. And then again, we're going to discard these. So whatever values are shown here, we're just going to exclude it from our extract, and we're going to include only these values over here that exist in our geo data. So again, this is a more complete data set. So that's why we're going to just use what's over here. And we're going to join again zip code. But I just want to show you the file formats, right? So you kind of at least have a feel what we're working with. So now that we have went over the file formats, let's get started, guys. So you need to go into AWS Glue. So I'm going to go to AWS Glue under the main section. Just so if you're not familiar with it, you'll see on the left menu, you'll find two sections. You have AWS Glue Studio. This is newish anyways. Then of course you have what's called Jobs. This is again new as well. Jobs Legacy. So we're gonna be building this under the new Jobs, or is it Jobs New? You know, I have done a lot of my work, a lot of my projects, Job Legacy. Because some of these that I created like months or even over a year ago. But also I just always been used to it. But need to start using the new Jobs, just because eventually they will probably decommission this, would be my guess. So I might as well start getting familiar with the new job module to create these jobs. And that's what we're going to do. A job is we're creating a process that's going to do some steps. The steps is going to be read data from this file, join together, generate, extract, and where to save it to. Like, that's part of a job. You have many steps. We're not going to go into more details of other stuff you could include in your job, like create triggers, have it on a schedule, for example. You know, we're not in this example. We're not going to create a data catalog. You can create a data catalog. We're not going to do in this case because we're dealing with two files, two data sets, and we're just going to pull those data sets as is. And we're not, we're just not going to go to that level. But again, what we're going to do would work. Very basic, straightforward, gets the job done. So let's get started, guys. Let me go ahead and I'm going to AWS Glue Studio, right? So let's go there. When you go into, this is again semi-new. When you go to AWS Glue Studio, on the left menu, you'll see jobs, monitor, connectors, and so on. Well, in our case, we're going to go to jobs because we're going to create a new job. Now, there's different, under job, create job, you have different sections, Python, shell, script. You could do that. It all depends on how you want to create it. We're going to walk through this more of using the visual tools that they have, right? So we're going to do it what I want to call, you don't need programming skills to build this job. As long as you understand mapping and process and things of that nature, then you're good. But you don't need to be a programmer to create this job. So we look at a source. We have S3 bucket. Because again, your source could be anything, man. It doesn't have to be S3. It could be a relational database, Redshift. The list goes on. But in this case, we're dealing with JSON and CSV files. So my source is S3. And then my target over here is going to be, now see how there's data catalog. This is where you may have data catalogs already built. That's a whole different video for that. But if you're familiar with that and you got those already configured, you could use that as well. And then of course, where you're going to save it to, the results. In my case, I'm going to save the results to S3, but it doesn't have to be S3. Again, you could save the results to a database, data warehouse. It's up to you. But I'm going to save it to S3 bucket. Once I do that, let's hit create. Okay, so it kind of gives you a pre-template, right? You can tell by looking at it. It has your S3 bucket, your applied mapping, then your target, your S3 bucket to save it. I'm going to kind of remove some of these because I don't need all of them. Well, I am going to need them, but I just don't need them in that order. I like to kind of build and order them the way I like it. So for my first source, we have two options here. Data catalog. I don't have any data catalogs configured, so I'm going to be choosing an S3 location, which is this option. Then of course you got to specify which S3 location. So I'm going to go ahead and browse to an S3 bucket. So again, the one that I was dealing with, YouTube storage 11012. And then what I'm going to do here, if I click on the customer folder, I could click on the file. I don't want to do that in this case. I'm going to just click on the folder. Now, the reason why I'm doing this is if I have a folder that may have many files, 15, 20, 100, doesn't matter, files in there, and they all happen to be in the same format, then I want this process to read all the files, extract all the files, not just one file, but all the files in that folder. So that's why I'm selecting the folder, not the file. Okay, now that I select it, you could tell it kind of auto detects the format, which is the JSON. Everything else could be left as default, so no problem there. And then we look at our output schema, we have our keys, right? Our column names, pretty much. Think of it that way, you know, file name, first name, last name, company, zip, all of that. So next, we're gonna add another source, because again, we're dealing with two sources here, not just one, we're dealing with two. So I'm gonna add another source for S3 bucket. Oh yeah, before I go further, if I come back here, give it a name. Go under node property. I'm gonna call this customer bucket. Okay, and I'm gonna call this geolocation bucket. Okay, and then now I'm gonna go to data source, select S3 location. And same thing, go to the bucket. I'm gonna select my folder, which is location. Now in this case, I do only have one file. So technically I could just select that file if I wanted to, but I'm just gonna select the folder, that's fine. The reason why I do that is, for some reason, if you ever, let's say same format file, but maybe there's some updates, changes, or it gets deleted and a new file name gets uploaded. As long as it's in the same format, it'll read it still, and it'll be able to process it like normal. So again, it auto-determines it's a CSV, all of that, so we're all good with that. Okay, so now that we have our two sources, we're gonna do a transformation. The first transformation that we're gonna do here is gonna be a join. So again, a join transformation is kind of what it sounds. We want to join two data sources together. So if I go to node properties, see where it says node parent. This is where I'm going to select the two nodes that I'm going to join. So these are considered nodes. This is node, think of this as the customer bucket node and the geolocation node. So I'm going to select customer bucket first, because this is what I'm going to call as my main file, my main source, and then my geo, which is my bucket. So now if I go to transform tab, we have to add a condition. So we select two sources, but they got to join somehow, right? And the way we're going to join it, because the geolocation, I know the zip code is unique. It only exists one time and one time only. So I'm going to end up under my customer bucket, I'm going to select zip. Under my geo bucket, I'm going to select zip code, right? Because again, this is not unique. This could be in here many times, but I know this is going to be unique. And when you do joins like this, you got to keep in mind, if you don't, it's like any join, right? Like if you're familiar with databases, if you join a table that exists many times, you're going to duplicate rows. In this case though, my geo file, I know is very unique. Zip code exists one time only, and that's why it makes sense. This is a many to one relationship. Many times, one time over here. We look at the output, we'll see all of these columns that will be included. Now you could tell some of these are included many times. City, and then we have city name, county name, county. Well, the one that we want to keep are these guys down here. This is part of our geo file. These we're going to exclude. And the way to do that is, now I'm going to add another transformation. In this case, it's going to be applied mapping. So under the applied mapping, again, go to node. You can always change the name. I'm going to leave it as is, but you can change the name. Under node parents, I'm going to select this join node parent, which is this guy here, the join. So now you can see it's all kind of, it's in order, right? Like it's kind of going in the flow. Two sources, you're going to join them together. This source next gets sent over to the applied mapping. Once it's over here, I could exclude. Like I'm going to exclude city, county, state, and zip. Now the reason why I'm excluding these, because they actually exist down here. Now under this, under my geo source, there's a state FIPS. Pretty much is a unique identifier. I don't need that. I'm going to exclude that guy as well. So now I have all of these. I'm pretty much keeping the one that I want. That's what I'm doing here. You could always change the name as well if you want to change the name. So you have the option to do that here as well. Now that I've done that and selected, pretty much excluded column that I don't want and just keeping the column that I do want, my final step is gonna be my target. This needs to go to a source, right? Again, you got your source and a target. It needs to go somewhere. In my case, it's gonna go to S3 bucket. In your case, it could be a Redshift database. It's up to you, but in my case, it'd be a S3 bucket. Oops. So I have an S3 bucket. Here's the format. See how I said JSON? It could be exported out to Parquet. If it's a big file, makes sense. CSV, JSON, it's really up to you. I'm gonna leave it as a JSON in my case. You could compress it if you like. Again, you got your two types. It's up to you. And then this, I'm gonna leave it as default. Do not update data catalog. That's fine. Partition keys, again, that's all optional. But I'm gonna pick my bucket. So in my case, I'm gonna go to the same bucket, and then I have this other folder in here, right? You can tell there's no files in here. But this folder is called customer with location. This is gonna where my export of my file, again, two different sources, JSON, CSV, gonna get joined together. It's gonna generate files and they're gonna get saved to this folder. So I'm gonna select that folder as my location. Oops. Okay, so now that I selected that, I have my output. I think that's it. So you can tell my output, this is how it's going to look. This is what's going to get saved. Once I got everything set, my flow seems to be all in order. The next thing is I need to give this a name. So let's change the name to this. I'm going to call this customer geo join, right? That's what I'm just going to call it. Then I'm gonna go to job details. When you go to job details, then you can change the name here too as well. But come to job details, and you can put a description. Now here's the thing: your IAM row, that should be created before you even try to do this this job. If you're not familiar with it, that's a whole different video on how to create a row specifically for Glue. Because again, your rows are based on what you're doing. If you're doing a task that relates to, I don't know, EC2, that row security, like permissions, is going to be different than a job in AWS Glue. So it all depends on the different services you're using, things of that nature. Again, that's a whole different video. So just keep that in mind. If you're not familiar, get familiar with IAM rows. If you have some kind of admin, you're a cloud administrator in your company, they should know how to configure that for you and have a row that you can use. In my case, I already created one, so I'm going to use my AWS Glue service row. So I'm going to just select it from the drop down. As we go down and look at the settings, this is going to be Python 3. Again, you could click Scala if you want, but I'm a Python guy, so I'm sticking with Python. Same thing with the Glue version. I'm using the latest version, which is 3. So see, I want you to look at the worker type. There used to be an option called standard. They don't have that no more. But now they have what's called G1X, which is, I think, memory intense. I think this is like CPU intense. So it's under that option. That's the only option, like in my case anyways. See right here where it says request number of workers. What I normally do in these cases, I like to start off with the lowest amount of workers, which is 2. I believe the amount of workers goes up to like 299 or something. I can't remember. It's a high number. I want to say, if I remember correctly, every worker is a vCPU. Think of it as a virtual core on a PC. Which means, the more cores you have, the more power you have to process your data. Again, I recommend start off the lowest amount, test out your job, your data, and see if that satisfies you from a timing and all that. What happens is the higher you go on these, because you are using more vCPUs, the cost goes up. The way they charge you for AWS Glue services, it's DPU. So like one DPU, and I'll show you in a minute what that equates to per job, like in this job with the lowest settings. but one DPU is like 44 cents per DPU. And we'll do some rough estimating just from a cost if you're interested. But nevertheless, I would recommend start low, unless you already know what you're dealing with. If you're dealing with data sets that are like billions of rows and things of that nature, then yeah, you may need more intense resources. But that's just be aware of that. You go down to a number retry. This is if it errors out, it'll retry again. And keep in mind, every time it runs, even if it errors out, it's using resources, which means you're going to get charged DPUs. It may be a small portion of DPU, but you get in charge. So normally I leave it at 0 unless there's a reason to have a retry. But if there is, then put a number, set a number to retry. I leave it at 0 because if it fails, I want it to fail and I want to look at the error message to see what is it. Most likely it's erroring out for a reason. It could be in my code, it could be my data, something, right? So for it to retry again, it doesn't really make sense to me because I know it's going to just error out again and again, and I just just reoccurring costs in at that point. Once I got that set, let's go ahead and save. So once you save, you have the option to run it here, or you could go to your jobs, and then of course you see your job down here. So you start creating mini jobs, you start seeing a list of mini jobs down here. And of course, it becomes easier to find your jobs by name, just by typing, the whatever name, right? If I type something, no match, but if I type join, boom, right, it finds that. So that comes in, it's very handy. So now let's go ahead and run this job. I'm going to click on it. Let's hit run. Cool. So now it's running. It doesn't tell us much here, like doesn't give the status. We just know that it's running. So in order to monitor your jobs, to kind of determine what's failing, what's not failing, all that, go to the monitoring section. And see how you'll see it says running. This is the link, so if I click on it, it should take me down to the job that's running. So you can look at all the jobs that are running right now. Or pretty much jobs, jobs running by status. So if you happen to have like 10 jobs running, this will show you all 10 jobs. And where they're at, what status, what step they're in. See how there's a DPU hours here? This would eventually tell us how many DPU hours it's utilizing, right? How much, pretty much how you're going to get charged. Again, this normally, let's see, nope, still running. Normally it takes about a minute to generate your service. So to my understanding, what's happening behind the scenes is this is a serverless process, right? Which I mean, when it runs, it's not like a server that's running all times. It's once you run the process, it spins up a virtual machine. As it spins up a virtual machine, it has the resources allocated that you configure. In my case, 2 workers, which should equate to 1 vCPU, I believe. And then whatever the G1X resource is. So it's kind of setting all of that. Once that is done, setting that up, then it starts your process. Your process may only take 10 seconds, but it takes a minute, maybe a little bit more than a minute, to spin up the VM. Now, once your process finishes, let's say your process takes 10 seconds, then it needs to shut down that VM, pretty much destroys it. And that may take 20 seconds, 30 seconds, or whatever, how long. So that's why overall, by default, even as I would say it would probably take like 2 minutes. See, now it's done, which means if I go back to my monitoring, come down, see how this took 0.04. You can't see it. Let me move it to the side. So if I come down, see how my job right here, the one that just ran at 2029. So this is a job that finished running. It ran at 0.04 DPU hours. Remember, 1 DPU hour is 44 cents. So that doesn't sound a lot, and it really isn't a lot. That's pretty cheap. But I'm going to explain in a minute a scenario where I was accruing a lot of costs for a couple of days, not even realizing it. So now it succeeded. It's done. It took a minute, right? We have our time, a minute. A minute's more rounding up, more like a minute and 30 seconds or 40 seconds, whatever. It doesn't tell you the seconds here. But it never, that's the minute, tells you the capacity. the worker type, then of course how the resources that he used. Like ultimately, that's how long the time, the resource, and the time that it took. It equates to DPU hours. So now if we go to our S3 bucket, I'm going to go to that folder, customer with location. Boom. See how we have 4 files? There's a reason why it creates 4 files. It's actually able to process it faster instead of having one big file. Let's assume you have 2 data sources and they're happy, like let's say like the geo file, which is a small file, which probably has like, I don't know how big the file is, but if we look at the size for the geo file, what is it? 1.2 megabytes, right? Because we're dealing with all the zip codes, which is like over 40,000 zip codes. And then we're dealing with a customer file, which is small. This one has 50 contacts. But let's say this contact list was 50 million. It would be a lot bigger file, 100 million or whatever, right? It'd be a bigger file. You wouldn't want this to be one big file. What AWS services actually does, it generates mini files, and in that case, if I happen to have 50 million customers, it would actually generate probably hundreds of these JSON files. The reason why I do that, it could process it. It could process more of it. It could do, it'd be able to do multi-processing because you have different files instead of just reading one big file, or read chunks of it into memory without having to read all of it into memory. I mean, again, what I'm trying to say is that even though it splits it up to mini files, I think there's a setting you could do to have it all go into one file. I would just leave it as is. It is beneficial to have multiple files. It is faster when it processes, especially when you're dealing with large files. So for that reason, I would recommend leaving. Now, you're dealing with very, very small files. You could do it, try to consolidate to one file, but I don't know. It's up to you. I don't think it's needed. So now let's look at the file, right? Let's look at the actual results of this. So I'm going to click on it, click on download, JSON. It doesn't have an extension, so you got to make sure to add the extension. And now I'm going to open it up. So if we take a look at it, let's view word wrap. You could tell if we take a look at this guy, we're joining everything together, man. We have a first name, last name, company name, address, phone number. Again, remember, address straight to phone number, which means no city, no state, none of that came in that file is gone. Phone number, email, and then we get to our state name, which is our zip-ter file, state abbreviation, zip code, county name, and city name. So see, we have all of that information on here. So this is all part of one row of data. So again, we're able to take 2 data sources, put them together. So you can see we're able to take 2 data sources, different format data sources at that, right? JSON, CSV, join them together, generate a extract that has both data sources together. We're able to exclude some of the column that we don't want to include. We're able to exclude that, then generate an output for this. Now again, my example, I generated an S3. The target was to an S3 bucket. Doesn't have to be an S3 bucket for you. It could be Redshift data warehouse. You could load it in there, load it to your relational database. Again, it's up to you where you want to put it at. I just put an S3 bucket, but the process overall is going to be the same for whatever your source is. Doesn't matter. The process is going to be the same the way I did it even for Redshift and database. So again, guys, hopefully this helped out on how to join 2 different files. Again, I joined JSON and CSV. It doesn't even have to be that. You could, like, files. It could be a JSON and database file. It could be data warehouse and a CSV file. Like, you have so many options what you could do on how to join together, right, different sources. So it's really up to you, based on your business needs. Hopefully this helps. Again, guys, give me a like, give me a follow. Appreciate all the love, and peace.